Welcome to the It's Your Story to Tell podcast, where brave people share their stories to inspire others in what's possible. I'm your host, Megan Babcock, founder of It's Your Story to Tell and the Coach Collective, and I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest, Riley Powell. Thanks for being here, Riley.
Well, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So a little bit about Riley. She is a speaker. She's a best-selling author, a wife, a mother to 3 amazing children from ages 2 to 17. What a spread. That keeps you pretty busy, I'm sure. And today she's going to walk us through her story and how she changed the narrative of her life to become rooted in the truth that God loves her deeply. Now she uses all that she's learned to lead others in finding their identity without performance, perfection, or exhaustion, to learn and hear God's voice in their lives. Oh, girl, I could have used you like about 7 years ago when I was exhausted. I was like trying to achieve everything, lived very perfectionistic. Whew, so I'm really excited about the conversation today.
Right. We all just need to get together and share our things because I'm sure we can all relate.
Absolutely. You guys, before we start, I just want to take a minute to acknowledge that you might be tuning in and be in a dark or desperate place. And I know I've been there. Riley's probably been there because life is really hard sometimes. And we just want to encourage you to get help. And sometimes that could be a trusted friend, maybe it's a family member, or even a counselor or a coach. But if you find yourself in crisis, I want you to know that you can get help right away. And you can do that by calling or texting 988 or chat 988lifeline.org. We hope that you find the stories from this podcast. They're inspirational, but also really equipping to kind of help you walk through the journey that you're on. And we're going to start by having Riley on with us for 2 episodes. This first episode, we're going to talk about her life and how she coped with feelings like, I'm not living the life I desire, or maybe you felt this way, but just not being congruent with, you feel you want something more in life. Right. And the point where she kind of surrendered to all of that and what happened, we'll be talking about in episode 2, how God took her on a journey, allowing her to uncover false narratives and replace them with truth. So Riley, thank you so much for being here, being willing to be vulnerable, and just help us to be able to see how we might take some of the things that you're sharing and put them to practice in our own life so that we can live free and fulfilled, aligned with who God created us to be. So I'm going to let you share the journey that you went on. I know that's just a broad question, but jump in wherever it feels good for you.
I will. I'm so excited to talk about this. I love to talk about this, and I love to get with other women and connect and just bring God close through story, right? Like our stories make him visible. And the whole reason I share it is to tell what he did. And so I can get into kind of the juicy tea of my life, but ultimately what I want to give is just a life and a confidence that God is for you, that you are liked by him, that you're nurtured by him, that you have all that you need by him. And so that's what I'm here for, because it is May tomorrow, right? For us who are recording today. And May is like that month of the year where we're like, can I just get through it? Because it's busy, it's just so busy. And we don't want to just get through. We don't want to say like, oh, this is just a season and then it be gone, right? Like we want to show up for our lives. And so for me, I've always had this obsession, I think, with time and efficiency. And so for me, I want to know what I've done and where I'm going and kind of how I spent my time. And um, I, I've just realized about myself that I feel really satisfied when I can say, this is what I did, this is where I'm going. But we don't always get that, right? So I'm going to back up, but I just wanted to kind of preface this season of our lives with the idea that we can walk through it with a confidence and an assurance that we're doing the right thing, that we're where we need to be, that our time is well spent, that we're not just checking off all these boxes and these tasks to meet expectations and to prove something or accomplish something or to be a good mom or any of those things that we're trying to strive for. I genuinely believe that we can live as moms and wives and women in an overflow from a place of confidence in our relationship with God. And so that's kind of the end. And so I'll go back to the beginning. But I wanted to preface it with that. So yeah, as you probably have picked up, I love to be busy. I love to multitask and accomplish all the things on the list. I live for writing lists and checking them off. I bet a lot of you relate to that. And so there was a season of my life where I had just filled it to the max with all the good things, right? And there's a reason for that, and we can kind of get into that. But ultimately, God called me into a quieter space, and I can just remember arguing with him so much. Like, God, meet me in the busy. I got you. I can hear while I do this. I can listen. You tell me where to go. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to do it 100%, right? And he's like, no, I don't. I'm not your taskmaster. I want you to come spend time with me. And I'm like, and I pouted, and and I'm not kidding. I'm telling you, it took years for him to like teach me to trust him. My way is better. My way is better. And so ultimately there came a point. So there came a point of surrender. And so I know we're going to get to that. And so I'm going to give you a little back again history into how we got into this place. And so when I was young, well, we didn't grow up in church, and my parents were partiers, and my dad was in the Air Force, and we moved a lot, and they loved me very much. I loved my childhood, but there was some unsteadiness, and then we kind of came to a place where both of my parents came to know the Lord. And then in middle school, I came into a personal relationship with Jesus. And on one of the youth trips, I didn't even know it at the time that it was some kind of calling, or I didn't know. I didn't have language for that. But now looking back, I can think, wow, God really shifted my heart towards story and in that space, right? And I can remember saying, yeah, I want to teach and tell my story and love women in a big way. And so that started this very underlying substantial depth to my spirit. And I don't know how to put words to that, except it just became my identity. Like, yeah, that's who God wants me to be. And so I live my life, and I love Jesus, and I sang in the worship team and served in kids ministry and had the home groups as I got older and did the Bible study, and all my friends knew, oh, she's the girl who loves Jesus. And then somehow at some point my actions didn't keep lining up with that. And I ended up getting married actually at age 19, and then divorced by 22, and just felt like life, like how can this happen to me? Like, I am a Christian girl. I was supposed to work in orphanages in Africa and lead worship for Hillsong or something. I don't even know. I don't know how I thought I was going to do all the things that I thought God needed from me, that God wanted from me to be a great Christian. Instead, I found myself in a place where I didn't belong anymore. And I didn't belong in youth group, and I didn't belong in the young adults group. And I I didn't know where I was going. And so I've had this second chance, and I don't normally tell my story step by step like this, so it feels exposing to me to be this vulnerable. Um, but next, I end up pregnant out of wedlock. And that's just the plain, simple way to say that. There's like not any cute Christian way to say it. It's just what happened. And ended up marrying him. And we've been married 18 years, and he is a beautiful man. I love him deeply, and we have a wonderful marriage, and he loves the Lord. And so God's grace really covered that that second chance. But from those experiences, I didn't really know how to handle that trauma, right? Like that's basically what it is. I didn't even know it was trauma. I just thought, God, I'm a screw up, right? Like I need to just put on my big girl pants, put on my happy face, get it together for the love, and move on. We got to move on and quit making all these stupid mistakes. And so that's what I did. We got married. We had a house. We had jobs. I went to grad school and just went on about our lives. And yet there's that underlying call, remember, to teach and tell story. And it just gnawed at me all the time. Like, this is who I am. Yeah, this is who I am. And yet nothing on the outside of my life reflected that, right? Nothing I was doing on the outside, the busyness, the busy job, all the things I was doing for the church, being happy, being a good friend, like none of those things showed anyone that deeper identity that God had spoken into my life so many years before. And so there came a place, I mean, in my 30s, honestly, when I realized that nothing on the outside was connected to what was on the inside. And it's like, how did this happen? And how am I in my 30s? Right? Like,
I'm just smiling. I mean, if you're listening to this, you can't see my smiling, but it's because I'm like, girl, I know you. Like, I am you. Like, down to baby out of wedlock, divorce, like knowing that there was a calling, but things got in the way. And so I just wanted to take a minute and just acknowledge that, like, God is about redemption, like the entire Bible. There was no perfect people. They were really, really messed up. Like, if you really like go through the stories and you're like, wow, is that like today? Because that's the same stories that we're living. And yet he is always wanting to meet us where we're at and to say, that purpose is still inside of you. That calling is still what I have for you. And I will be patient. I love that he's like, I'm not your taskmaster. Like, he's not an abusive God. He gives us our free will because he wants us to just be in alignment with him. And
right. And when we come, thank you for that connection. It means it softens the blow a little. But you know what? The church does not necessarily make space for all of that ugly, right? No. I deeply love the church, and I want to be there. That's my family, my community. But if we're just extremely honest, it's hard to talk about our weaknesses in church. And there really wasn't.
It's hard to talk about your weaknesses. Let's just be real. Anywhere. And like, that's why there is this culture of just continually striving and never being satisfied.
Right.
And so I think, yes, it is everywhere, and you would hope it's not in the church, right? But I know I was there. I was living the fake me really well. You didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. You
Yeah.
look at my Facebook, you're like, wow, look at that perfect.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was not a good situation I was in.
Mm-hmm.
But I was showing up, I was doing church, I was in ministry, and I wasn't being vulnerable. I wasn't being showing up authentically. I was afraid of being judged.
Yeah.
And that's why God's called me to do this,
Right.
is so that we are having these conversations,
Right.
because
Because
they need to happen, or we
we
can't welcome people in that need Jesus.
exactly. And just, yeah, making space. I mean, you're not going to just walk into church and be like, hey, here it is. Let me lay it out. Right. That's not it. But we can have people in our homes, and we can have conversations, and we can admit to being human, and, and just becoming a little bit more comfortable with our story, I think, and I really believe that starts with by being honest with God and being in a place where you trust him and feel safe and secure with him, because then what do you have to lose? Nothing. Like, no one else's rejection or opinion carries the weight that it did before, because you have found a place where you're rooted and grounded in love, and you know the depth of his love for you, because you've found his voice, and you've identified as his daughter. And so that is where the shift happens. And that's where the beauty and the magic and life comes to happen, comes to be. But that takes work, right? Like,
Yeah.
it takes work. It takes walking through the dark. It takes that moment of surrender, and surrender every day, where you're like, okay, God, like, my life is yours. My weaknesses are yours. You tell me to bring my whole self and love you with my whole self, not just my happy face, not just my accomplishments or performances, or even my Bible reading and my song choice, or even those things. Like, let's literally strip everything. And if it's just me and God, what is left? Is there any substance? Right?
Wow. Yeah.
And so, I mean, more recently, honestly, I've been through a journey where God kind of rewrote the narrative of my life. But more recently, he's really just taken me to the floor, into a posture of openness, and said, just come to me. Like, no words, no request, no. And it's not that there are not moments for that, because there are. I still brain dump all the things, right? Like, here are all my things. But there are also moments where it's like, no, you just get to come, breathe in my presence, and rest, and then live from that place of overflow, because there's so much clarity in his presence there. So, well, do you want to hear about kind of the journey?
Well, yeah, I was going to say either the journey, or even just kind of the point of surrender. Like, when, and then maybe we go into kind of the journey in this next episode
Sure.
of how to hear God's voice and all of that. But what was that point where you're just like, all right, I'm not going to keep doing this the way I have.
Right.
And I'm going to surrender.
I have a very finite moment. I know when it happened. There's nothing grand to tell you. I literally was just lying in bed, because that's when God can find me, when it's completely pitch black and silent, and I'm not distracted by a million things. So I feel like he wakes me up to talk to me, most of the time, because I'm still learning to be still. So yeah, that's where it happened. And I can just remember that moment when I was like, okay. And it was just this release. And it's not that I had not, I mean, for years prior to that, I'd worshiped, I'd surrendered my life. I continually said, oh, my life is yours. And yet there was still this new layer of, okay, you have it all. Like, whatever the cost, I lay my life down. I carry my cross. I'm willing to do whatever. And genuinely, I thought he was going to humiliate me. Genuinely, at that point, I did not have a trust or an understanding of his character, and thought, okay, well, I'm just, definitely laying on, giving my life up, and I'm just going to be humiliated. And it's like the people who think, oh, if I become a Christian, he's going to move me to, some remote tribe and make me, like we're afraid. We're afraid of God. We're afraid of what he's going to call us to do because we don't know him. And so from that point, he really just unraveled me and and created just this blank canvas to build again. And it just takes time. Honestly, surrender it's just this growing of trust, and it's a continuous active surrender of, you might have a moment where you kind of feel that shift, but at the same time, it's just a practice or a habit of coming open-handed and saying, okay, I don't know the outcome. I don't know how we're going to do this, but here it is. Show me the way,
I love that. Well, one of the things that you said in the beginning, and I think it was so important because this was, there was fear, and I didn't have a trust in what God might ask me to do. And I remember the point of surrender for me was in this conversation I was having with him about, why aren't you answering this prayer? Yeah. Like, it's aligned with what you say is in the Bible. And I'm asking in your name and you're not answering.
Right. I'm doing all the things.
And as close to audible, because it was like, it was just like, I heard it so clearly in my spirit. He said, I'm not an abusive God. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, because you're asking for something that it requires someone else to participate, and they have free will. And whether or not it's the right thing or the best thing, they have a choice in that. And I don't know why, but I do know why now. At that moment, it was like, oh, you're not going to force yourself on me. You are like a loving father, not just because I had been in abusive relationships and toxic things from stuff that happened in my past. And I had built these narratives. And so then I was not trusting of men. And that was translating into this lack of trust for God. And in that moment, I felt safe. And I was able to like, oh, wow, okay, I can trust you in that moment. And that was really key for me to be able to surrender.
Right.
Because if you don't feel safe, the last thing you're going to do is like not fight for your life. Right. And so I love that you touched on that, and I'm excited. We're going to come back in this next episode and let you walk us through, as you've grown, learn to hear God's voice more clearly, and just, how he's using you to help others to do that same thing. Where can they find you online if they want to connect with you?
Sure, lots of places. The website is www.rileysloanpowell.com. Instagram is the same name, and Facebook is the same name. So easy peasy.
Easy. And we will link to it in the show notes. But thank you, Riley, for being here. And I look forward to continuing this conversation with you. Come back, you guys, and share this story if you feel like you know someone that could really benefit from learning to hear God's voice and just trusting who he is and what he has for their life.